Okay, we get to talk about Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. Son of a bitch. Okay. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. Distributed by Artisan Entertainment. Written and directed by Joe Berlinger and written by Dick Eby. Hold on. Beebe, excuse me. Starring Kim Director, Jeffrey Donovan, Erica Learson, Tristan Schuyler, and Stephen Barker Turner. Please tell me I got that right. It's not in here. Shit. Stephen Barker Turner. I am sure that's correct. Starring those people. Written and directed by those people. Distributed by Artisan. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 is the sequel to the Blair Witch Project. And it was made 1 year later. A little bit over 1 year later. And released in October of 2000. And holy shit, is this movie a mess. I'm not going to go into the full depth and length I want to go into about this movie. And the troubles that the production had for it. But I will give you a link. Go to Good Bad Flicks. There's a guy named Cecil. He runs the channel. He does a really good job. I'm going to give you a link to this video called Exploring Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. The guide takes about 18 to 20 minutes. I know, it seems long. But trust me, it's less painful than listening to me watch, moan, and bitch about this fucking movie. Or any movies in general. He's got better production going for him for his videos than I do. I gotta stop complaining about that. I'm sorry. Okay. So what's the plot for Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2? Oh my god. I could just give you the plot from the back of the DVD case, but even then you'll be confused by the movie itself. So I'm just going to give you my interpretation of the plot of the movie and how the studio wanted to be held. Okay. The plot would go something like this. The film which you're about to see is a fictional account of an events that had occurred in September of 1999, just a few months after the release of the Blair Witch Project. 3 suspects were apprehended involved in this case, but only one named Jeff Patterson, his name was released to the public. The other 2 defendants' names were kept hidden, and they're in question for a series of murders that occurred around Burkittsville, Maryland, just only a few months after release of the movie, The Blair Witch Project. That's the plot. Did that confuse you? A little bit? Okay. The Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 takes place outside of the continuity of the Blair Witch Project. What do I mean by that? Well, in the original version of this movie, before the studio stepped in and completely botched a few things, I won't say completely botched, the movie was already botched, but whatever. The original version of the movie was supposed to take place within the real world. You know, the real world where we know that the Blair Witch Project, this movie, is fake. The mythology is also possibly fake. However, the studio release version of this movie, the only version you can watch, they sell the movie in a way where it's like, okay, the events of this movie is fake, but the legend that you read on the website, all that is actually real. And because it's real, the events of this movie happen. Even though that was not the director or writer's goal or aim with this movie. This movie was supposed to be an actually good movie. The original plot of the movie, which is still on the back of this DVD case cover, and you can find an IMDb plot summary. The plot is 5 obsessed movie fans of the original Blair Witch Project go into the woods where the movie was filmed, and they check out all the sites where the film was shot and everything. And after spending a night in the woods, they return to society, and weird stuff is happening to them. And that's the plot of the movie. And the movie wants to make you question, it's not a found footage movie, this is an actual movie. Which is interesting, because the director of this movie, Joe Berlinger, is a legitimate documentary filmmaker. If you guys don't watch documentaries a lot, or not at all, I highly recommend the Paradise Lost trilogy. It is a really good trilogy. It is about the West Memphis 3. It's about these 3 kids who in the 90s were who were under arrest because they were under suspicion that they committed murders against this little boy, or was it 2 little boys? I'm trying to remember. I already forgot the plot of those 3 movies. Holy shit. But basically, there was this crime in the 90s called the West Memphis 3. These 3 young boys were placed under arrest because they supposedly murdered a group of little boys. Supposedly under satanic and ritualistic stuff. Supposedly, as far as I'm concerned, as of now, those 3 people are out and walking about. They were found not guilty. I think they concluded by saying, you know what, just watch those movies and look up West Memphis 3. Because you will learn more from that than from me. Because I barely remember it. It was a long time ago when I watched these. But I highly recommend Paradise Lost Trilogy if you haven't seen Joe Berlinger's work. I believe this is his one and only attempt at making an actual feature-length movie. Basically, after the release of the first one, he wanted to make a movie that kind of stood out from the first one. And let's face it, this is the first sequel to a found footage movie. I'm pretty sure after the release of this movie, a bunch of parodies and such started coming out. The whole found footage subgenre boom didn't happen until the release of that god-awful Paranormal Activity movie. And yes, I said god-awful. You hate that? Leave a comment or something. Or hold it to yourself. Or find me in person and spew shit about how you thought it was a really good movie. I don't care. Go ahead. I didn't like the first Paranormal Activity, but I would definitely say the sequels are far worse. I'll get into that when I do Paranormal Activity. But basically, Joe Berlinger for this movie, I keep rambling. Joe Berlinger of this movie wanted to create a movie that basically told a message against the first one and show what a real documentary was. Or at least hint towards the idea that what you see and what you perceive to be found footage may not be really found footage. Because stuff happens in this movie. Because this movie is film and this movie is video. And basically the message of this movie wants you to think that film lies, but video tells the truth. Well, watching this movie, you'll get the two mixed up. That's what the director's intent for the movie was, but the studio changed that, and they decided to keep the mythology of the Blair Witch still real and contact. And remember what I said in the previous review? If you haven't seen the review, what I previously said was, if you don't know the mythology for the Blair Witch for this movie, you will be confused. Because the first movie only gives you enough to understand a little bit about the Blair Witch. So, because it wants to stay ambiguous and keep you in the dark a little bit. But this movie, if you do not do your homework and look into the mythology for the Blair Witch, you're going to be confused as hell. It's kind of like going into college on exam day without your study guide, or at least having not looked at the study guide and fucking yourself on the exam. This is your exam, and if you don't know what's on this thing, you're fucked and you're going to be confused as hell. Remember what I said in the previous video, if you watched this, hopefully, but for this movie, there was a tie-in called Curse of the Blair Witch, a 45-50 minute thing that you can watch before the movie. You didn't need to, but it was there. For this movie, there's a thing called Shadow of the Blair Witch. It's a 45-minute thing. As far as I'm concerned, it's probably on the DVD-ROM feature side on this movie. So if you have a computer to do that, you can maybe find it. You can even find the original shooting script. You can find out where this movie went wrong. I'm sorry. Oh my god, this movie. Go on Vimeo. You can find Shadow of the Blair Witch there. You can watch it. It's a necessity that you watch that before you watch this, and it'll make better sense. Because not only will you get the Legend of Blair Witch, you will get what the fuck is going on with the characters in this movie. At least one of the characters. Because, again, the only name given, as I said for the plot summary earlier, is Jeff Patterson. What can I say about this movie? It's an actual feature-length movie, and surprisingly, the acting in this movie was better. You got professional actors in this movie. You got Jeffrey Donovan in this movie. Jeffrey Donovan was an actor who appeared on a show called Burn Notice, I think, and he played Doug Gerhardt in Season 2 of Fargo. This guy can act, but for whatever reason in this movie, It's not there. Erica Learson's in this movie. She's been in the few horror movies I've seen in the past. She's probably the only one whose performance I actually bought in this movie. Everyone else in this movie is either over the top as hell or underselling it. Except for Kim Director, I think she did a fantastic job. She does my favorite scene out of this entire movie, and it's just her bitching against a cashier at a store because she's being a bitch. It's fucking funny. I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube. Acting for this movie. My God, the acting. It can go back and forth. Sometimes they do it well. Sometimes they underperform. Sometimes they go over the top. It's back and forth, and it's weird as hell. Cinematography for this movie. Oh my God, cinematography. The cinematography for this was better, and the camera shook. What I mean by that, sometimes the camera doesn't stay on one thing for more than 5 seconds. There's like an entire scene where these characters are getting drunk or high in the movie, and there's like quick cut, my God, and it's just all over the place, and it's supposed to be confusing because they're getting drunk and high, but that's not working. It's making you confused as hell because you don't know what the fuck is going on. Oh my God, okay. I'm pissed because this movie could have been better. Again, watch that video in the description link. You can see what this movie could have been. But holy shit, this movie fails. Oh my God. Special effects are good for this movie. For what there was, they're okay. Cinematography, like I said, okay. Production design for the main setting of this movie, I will say, is a plus. It's creepy as hell, and it works for the movie. Basically, this movie is an ambitious attempt at making a sequel that's not a carbon copy of this. The new Blair Witch movie getting released in theaters is basically just a carbon copy of this. But you won't know that until you get to the review of that movie, which I'll talk about extensively, possibly. If I can hold myself and keep my manner. Oh my God. So my overall rating for this movie, it's a 4 out of 10. Yeah, I will say it's a 4 out of 10. There are parts of this movie that I like, but overall it's not enough for me to say you need to rent it, or it's not enough for me to say buy it. I'll definitely say if it does intrigue you, go ahead and give it a rent. It's a bitch to find a rent though. I had to pay $8 offline to get this movie. I don't necessarily think it was worth the money for that, but I spent worse. I've spent $20 on a piece of shit. I'll get into that sometime later. It's called Crinoline Head. It's not a total piece of shit, but it's a piece of shit. I'll stop saying shit. So my overall ratings for the movies. This one, it'll be a 4 out of 10. I didn't give my rating for the first movie in the last video, but it'll be somewhere in the description or in the annotations. But if you didn't get it then, my rating for this would be a definite 6 out of 10. Scratch that. It's a 7 out of 10. It's a 7. And this is going to stay a 4. This could have been better. It could have been a really good movie. That's all I can say about these two movies. That's all I can say about this movie, because this movie just pissed me off. Oh my God. One more thing. You watch Cecil's review on the movie about exploring what could have been. It'll make it seem like the director's original version would have been better. To the extent I'll say it would have been better, it still would have been confusing though. The director set up scenes in this movie specifically to make callbacks to other movies. And the message for that was supposed to be the characters have been grown so attached to media that media images are appearing in their heads and they're seeing these things as they happen. Or at least the Blair Witch in the movie is using all their media images and using it against them. That makes sense and would work, but it would only work if the director knew how to fucking reference the movies that were referenced. There's a scene in the movie where one of the characters thinks he's being attacked by dogs, and then the dogs disappear. Supposedly, Joe Berlinger claimed that was supposed to be a reference to The Omen. It would have been a reference to The Omen if the dogs were Rottweilers. Because in The Omen, they were Rottweilers. They're not in this movie, they're German Shepherds. There's a scene in the movie where a woman is spinning around a tree naked, and the director claims it's a reference to Evil Dead 2, where one of the Deadites in the movie was doing a naked dance around a tree. Now, while I could see that, that's not what made the Evil Dead 2 that's not what made that thing referenceable. What made that dance referenceable was that Deadite had her fucking head off, and as she was dancing, the head just stood still, and it looked creepy and funny. With this movie, it's just a naked chick spinning around a tree, and she looks totally, completely fine. And then there's another part in the movie where the characters think they need to rewind the tapes that they filmed backwards in order to discover the answers that they need. And the director claims that is a reference to The Exorcist. I haven't seen The Exorcist in years, and I'm pretty sure the only thing they did anything backwards in that movie was audio recordings of the possessed girl, Linda Blair, as she was speaking demonic shit. I believe that's correct. But in this movie, they're rewinding tapes. That's not a reference. It's a reference if you're rewinding audio tapes, not video footage. So supposedly, people who've seen horror movies were supposed to get the references in this, but I didn't catch them. I didn't catch them until I watched the commentary or until I watched Cecil's review for it. It's like the director thinks, the director of this movie and the writers of this movie treated their audience like they were smart enough to know the mythology of this movie and to know what the references there were in the movie. But I didn't, and nobody else. Nobody knew what the fuck else was going on in this movie. No one saw Shadow of the Blair Witch in order to understand this movie. And if you're curious as to what Book of Shadows is, Jeff Patterson in the tie-in Shadow of the Blair Witch, which you need to watch before watching this, because that's your homework before you watch this. Jeff Patterson was making his own film similar to the Blair Witch Project, and he was calling it Book of Shadows. I'm telling you this now because there is no Book of Shadows in this movie. If you're wondering what Book of Shadows is in real life, it refers to the Book of the Occult or the Book of Witches. At least the Witch's Handbook or whatever, back in the Salem days or whatever. I don't know anything about witches. That should be a given. Or at least I believe it's the book for Wiccans, maybe? I'm not entirely sure. There, I didn't do my homework for this movie. If I caught your interest, go see the review for the new Blair Witch movie. This will be a joy. And if not, I'm sorry. I'll do better. Subscribe, comment, like, whatever. Spread the word if you want.